Happy Wednesday and happy new video day. So today I have a little bit of change of scenery for you guys. I'm filming in my car. So I hope you enjoy this fully thought out content. Today I'm going to talk about my daughter's birth. I think the timing is really fitting because her birthday is actually tomorrow. So my daughter is born July 3rd. And I think that's so ironic because from the minute she was born on this day, I knew that her personality was going to be larger than life. She was going to be just the biggest personality in the room, and I am not wrong. My daughter 100% is the person that commands the attention, commands the energy in all the spaces that she's in. So I definitely, thought that up right. This began in a very interesting way because one day I was sitting at the laptop and I was just kind of scrolling through Facebook, living that interesting existence. And something literally told me, go take a pregnancy test. I got this overwhelming feeling that I needed to take a pregnancy test, and soon. And today, when I think about that, I feel like something told me that because I was taking medication that you really shouldn't take while pregnant. And so the sooner I found out about my pregnancy, the sooner I could be off my medication. That was a horrifying thought at the time, and we'll get into why, but something told me to go take a test. Nonetheless, I took a test, and I wasn't expecting it to be a positive. Not even a little bit. I didn't have any symptoms. I was really not educated in the way that you can be pregnant and not have morning sickness the very first day that you're pregnant, not, have overwhelming symptoms. I thought in order to be expecting, you had to have all the symptoms and then some. That is not the case. The symptoms come about 8 weeks in, really, is when they hit me. So I take this test and I flip it over and there's 2 lines. And personally, I had to check the box like 6 times and make sure that I didn't have, like line eyes. I'm just seeing things. The lines were dark. I was being ridiculous. I didn't know how to take it. This was my first pregnancy ever in life. I didn't know how to react. I was happy, but then again, I was very scared. I was nervous. I was everything balled into one. So my first instinct was to go tell her dad, and he was playing a video game at the time. And I went out there and I showed him the test and I said, it looks like we're having a baby. And his response was to freak out. He freaked out and he was like, what are we gonna do? This isn't part of my plan. This isn't part of blah, blah, blah. Like, he was just freaking out. And I was like, I'm gonna do what everybody else that finds out they're pregnant is doing. I'm gonna be, I guess, pregnant for the next 9 months, and I'm gonna have a baby. I don't know if you're new to this concept. He obviously wasn't, because he had a daughter when I met him. But I was like so confused. I'm like, what do you mean, what am I gonna do? What everybody else does? Like, what do you mean? It's not like I was 15 and I was finding out I was pregnant. I was 23. I was well into the age of, all right, this is not way too early for it to be normal. I was 23. I was not, 16 in a real pickle. So for him to react like that really upset me. And the next day he did apologize, but, you never forget the way. I'm going to say one thing about women is that you never forget the way that people treat you when you're having a baby. Because emotionally, physically, Spiritually, you are vulnerable for 9 months. You really are. And there's one thing that is true, is that you do not forget the way that people treat you and the things that are said to you during a pregnancy, because that is when you need the support of your family, of your friends. Not everybody gets the support of their family and friends. I know that my circle was certainly small. It's always been small, if I'm being honest, but at that time I really felt alone. I felt like it was just me and my little baby. And I got very sick. In my first pregnancy, when I realized I couldn't take my anxiety medication, I freaked out initially. I really did, because I didn't know. You know, there was a lot of things that I was very naive to. I knew that there were certain foods I wouldn't be able to eat for 9 months. I was willing to deal with that. I didn't know that I wouldn't be able to take my anxiety medicine, and that scared the living daylights out of me, because without my anxiety medicine, I had panics in the daytime, in the nighttime, in my sleep, first thing that happened when I woke up, you know, in the middle of the day, just all day long, all night long. It was panic attack after panic attack after panic attack. And believe me, there were times when I thought, I cannot do this for another minute more. But the strength of a mother is something that is crazy. And then on top of that, I had really bad morning sickness. So I went to the hospital and they diagnosed me with what they call hyperemesis gravidium or something along those lines. And it just means really bad morning sickness. You can't keep anything down. I went to the hospital, and there was a couple times in this pregnancy that, you know, the doctors weren't great to me. They kind of treated me like I was just an annoyance, like you can't just deal with your morning sickness on your own type of thing. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you just gotta, you know, eat some crackers and ginger ale or whatever helps ease your stomach. But sometimes chemically, it does not sit well with your body. And this is what was happening to me at the time. The pregnancy hormones and my body were not meshing. They were not becoming one. And once I hit around that 8-week mark, it really started. It hit me like a brick wall. Eventually, I just got to the point where I just laid next to a pan that I had a plastic bag in as the liner to just throw up in. And that's how I really discovered my heroes of the YouTube community, was just being so sick and not being able to get up. I was kind of confined to my bed. That's how I discovered Trisha Paytas' channel. I discovered a few other people, but that stuck out to me. Trisha Paytas really made me laugh and really just made things a little bit better for me, to be honest with you. I remember I used to watch so many of her videos, binge watch for so many months. Just, that's all I would watch. And then crafting videos and things like that, kind of to distract me. I was so sick for 6 months, throwing up day and night, and just not ever feeling any comfort. It was like a constant battle for me. Emotionally, it was a battle, and I will never forget the just struggle that first pregnancy was. My second one was a little bit different. Not too crazy different, but different. And then, you know, of course, being so physically sick and having panic attacks nonstop I had panic attacks for the entire 9 months. Not being able to be on my medication. That was unfortunately what was an everyday reality for me. I could not take my medication. I wouldn't, even if I had the chance to. I had a few left over in case of an emergency, and I still didn't touch them, because every time I would think this day is bad enough to take one, I would think of my daughter, and immediately I would just, move on to the next thing. I can't even explain to you, there are some people that have one panic attack and they really are like freaked out by the experience. They're like, how can somebody have anxiety or panic disorder? I could never do that all the time. That is really what I was living. I was seeing a psychiatrist at the time because I didn't want to stop seeing one just because I was pregnant. I was always seeing one. And I was just in such a rough place emotionally. I remember leaving my psychiatrist's office one day, driving home, and there was some traffic because, of course, I lived in California, and just screaming at the top of my lungs. I mean, I'm driving and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs because of all this pent-up frustration. I felt like nobody was listening to me. Nobody was hearing me. Nobody cared. I felt like if I walked into a hospital and said, I'm having a panic attack, will you please help me? I feel like I'm having a heart attack. They'd look at me like I'm a joke and say, just go lay down. I went to the hospital for the first instance of being so dehydrated that I really was very weak and I could hardly get into the car. I waited too long. And sure enough, I got an IV. They gave me some Zofran. And the amount of Zofran that they were giving me was not really working for my nausea. I was still gagging. And I asked them, is there something else that I can do for this? And the guy goes, no, not really. You're just pregnant. I'm like, yeah, I really reached that conclusion a couple months ago. So thank you for that. I was in the hospital very often, my first pregnancy. I got very dehydrated and there was nobody there to take care of me and, make sure that I was drinking water or anything. That point will come up again in my next video following this one. When people used to tell me, you're really sick because you're having a girl. This always happens to people that are pregnant with a girl. It's got to be a girl. And I'm like, she's got to get her act together. If it's a girl, if it's a boy, they've got to get their act together because I can't live like this is basically what I was thinking. And I still do. I still really struggle with this, but especially because my panic attacks were daily. I had a super fear, excuse me, let me focus this. I had a super fear of death. I had a fear that I was dying and that nobody was going to be able to help me. There was one instance where, Lord bless her heart, there was a nurse and I was in the emergency room getting an IV fluids. I was kind of like a regular at the hospital by now. This was like the second or third time I'd been to the emergency room. And the nurse is like, you know what, we've got to go downstairs because the OB is on his way here. He left for the day and he's on his way back. So I'm like, okay. I didn't put two and two together that we'd have to go to the bottom floor of the emergency room. Okay, if you imagine what's underneath the emergency room, you know where I'm going with this. A pregnant woman with a massive fear of death, and you are about to roll me by the room of death. Like, it just, like, my heart rate is going up just thinking about this because it was so horrifying. So I remember this nurse unhooks my bed and she's taking me downstairs. Okay. And I'm like, thinking about it, I'm like, what's down here exactly other than this ultrasound room? Like, what is down here? We passed these two big metal doors and she's like, that's just the morgue, no big deal. And I was like, wrong, huge deal. Why am I even in the vicinity, the same floor as, like, we gotta go upstairs. Like, I started to internally freak out. Okay. Like, this was not, is this gonna help? This was not the move for this nurse to make on me, especially with my panic attacks as bad as they were. Like, I think that's what you want. You want me to not be here, is what you're doing. She was like, no, I mean, it's nothing, you know, too wild. And I mentally just checked out. I was like, I can't. What? So she wheels me in this room that's just down the hall, and she goes, the OB will be here in 20 minutes. I'm like, that's 19 and a half minutes too long to be waiting for this man. It ended up being like 30 minutes, but boy, it felt like a whole lifetime waiting right there next to the worst possible place that I could have been at that time, being pregnant, being so afraid. It was just a terrible time to just be existing for me. Let me just say that right now. It was horrifying. The OB comes, and you know, when you have an ultrasound, at the very first ultrasound, it looks just like you've got a little dot in there, like there's nothing really going on. That time I was about 15, 16 weeks along when I got this ultrasound done, and she had her little arms and her little legs, and I was like, you know, for a second, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's my baby that I'm growing in there. Like, it just hit me like, okay, this is the bigger picture that I need to worry about. All of my fears aside, this is what matters. So they take me out of there. She's healthy and she's doing great. I'm the one that's not thriving. The baby's doing great. It's me that's not thriving, for more reasons than one. I am released from the hospital and I go home, and you know, every time I'm just talking about how I'm not feeling well, I'm not feeling supported. Her dad wasn't really good at supporting my feelings. He wasn't a really present person in my pregnancy. He was very, well, why don't you go lay down? Why don't you go take a nap? Why don't you go do something? You know, he kind of just was better off when I wasn't around to complain. So during that 9 months, it was very isolating. But when I would see the pictures of my baby as I got farther along in my pregnancy, you know, I had my baby shower and my family threw my baby shower for me, and I just felt a lot of love from everyone. And that was probably the first time that I felt actually loved and supported, was my baby shower that I had when I was 8 months pregnant, so very far along. I was due to have her June 25th, and I ended up being induced July the 2nd, but of course she came July the 3rd. Her birthday, like I said earlier, is tomorrow, and it's so crazy how time flies so fast. The days are long, but the years are short, as some people say. And that's really true. It's so true, just looking at how different my life is today than it was back then. To see how I was living so isolated, like I was my own support system, and I felt that that was normal. I felt that nobody, like, it wasn't possible to have support from your significant other more than I was getting. And in my next video, when I talk about my pregnancy with my son, you'll see the polar opposite difference. I just went so long being so tortured, such a tortured person, in this panic disorder, in this sickness by myself, feeling alone in this pregnancy. My morning sickness lasted about 6 months, so nonstop for 6 months. throwing up day and night. It felt like a lifetime. But the day, and I still remember it like it was yesterday, driving to the hospital to actually have my daughter was crazy. I'm like, there's no way there's an actual baby inside of me. And I was huge. I was big in the stomach. But of course, it was my first time having a baby. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't feel anything with my daughter's birth. My son's was different. But the epidural worked completely with her birth. And when I tell you, don't get emotional. Like, stop crying. When I tell you how I fell in love for the very first time, when she was born, all that fear just left my body. All the panic left my body. And the first time that the doctor physically handed her to me, I felt like I was not alone anymore. That feeling of just loneliness, that cloud of just gloom over me was gone in an instant. I felt like I wasn't alone in this world anymore to be afraid by myself. I felt like I had my person, my purpose, my everything. And it always sounded so cheesy to me, you know, how your life changes the minute you hold your child for the first time, but it's so true. Because everything so negative and so bad that I was experiencing all the way up until her birth, it dragged me down so much. But seeing her face and holding her for the first time reignited my passion. Seeing this little girl that I created really brought me back to where I needed to be. Made me a mother for the first time. It made me feel like a protector for the first time. It made me feel like I had a purpose. And this is why God put me on this planet. Not to live a life of doom and gloom and be a, slave to my panic attacks and my anxiety. But this is why I'm put on this earth. To be a mom to this little girl. And every day, when I think about that pregnancy, I feel like I know that it felt like it went forever because I was so sick and I was so miserable during the pregnancy. But all of that was so worth it once she was born. Once I could physically see her, all of those worries were gone. And I felt so much better. I didn't have very bad postpartum. When I noticed the first couple signs, I was seen immediately and I got help for that. I highly recommend that for everybody and everybody who's having kids. The minute that you see or feel signs of postpartum that you may not be feeling like yourself, please make an appointment and be seen as soon as possible. I promise you will not regret it. My daughter and her birth changed everything for the better for me. It gave me purpose. She gave me life again. And I'm living life through her eyes and my son's eyes, almost for the very first time, it feels like. I'm seeing what a normal childhood looks like through the eyes of my kids. I'm seeing what it's like to live with a mom and a dad. I'm seeing what it's like to live in a cohesive, healthy environment for the first time. And I could not ask for more. The moment she was born, and I don't want to sound sappy, but the moment she was born, I knew that there had to be a higher power, a creator bigger than me, because there's no way that all of my issues became not important so fast in that moment that I held her for the first time. There's no way that there's not something bigger than me existing in this universe that made all my problems almost insignificant. This video is dedicated to all of the moms out there, all of the expectant moms that are searching YouTube for, anything relatable. My tagline on my channel is a relatable channel because that's what we do here. We're relatable. I love you guys so much. My last video has surpassed 100 views, which is wild, and I'm extremely thankful. You guys know this. I am so thankful to each and every single one of you guys that watch my videos, that subscribe to me. I cannot even explain my gratitude to you guys for supporting me in my YouTube endeavor, in watching my videos. You guys are really the reason why I have the drive to continue to make this content, because there's somebody out there watching, and there's somebody out there that likes what I do. And that's really the driving force as to why I do what I do. So thank you guys so much for sticking with me for another week of story times, of a little vlog, if you will, in the car. I love you guys so much, and I'm sending you all my love and my gratitude. And here's to hopefully soon 60 subscribers. I'm gonna put that out there in the universe. I hope I get there at some point. But at 57, I believe I am very grateful. I will see you guys on new upload Wednesday for a new video. And until then, have a beautiful 4th of July, and I'll see you guys on Wednesday.